Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be joined now by Jim Scott, who's the founding partner at Bright Group. And the strapline that he has on his Twitter profile is helping business leaders execute strategies and execute them flawlessly. So create strategies and execute them flawlessly. So thanks for joining me today, Jim.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
No. So what we're going to talk about today is kind of like common problems that SME business owners, like particularly owner managers, might face when they're trying to grow the business, like any challenges they might struggle to overcome. So do you want to explain a little bit more about who you are and what you do at Bright Group?
Yeah, so as Paul said, my name is Jim Scott, and Bright is a company that's evolved quite quickly, actually, over the last few years. Started out as a recruitment company, and my business partner, Paul Copley, led that in its first year or so. And over the last couple of years, we've begun to introduce some of the services I offered through a different company that I'm involved with, which are principally management consulting and coaching services, which are aimed at growing companies rather than large corporate companies. I think there's a big expectation within the small business community or startup community that consulting work is usually the reserve of big corporates. Mm-hmm. So we saw a bit of a gap in the market to help smaller businesses and growing businesses to get access to consulting services and coaching services to help them navigate some of their challenges, assess what options they have, and really get into execution and get that focused in a big way. So that's what we do: recruitment, consulting services, and coaching.
Okay, great. And when we were talking last week, there's a lot of established SMEs who are doing pretty well for themselves, but they might get to a point where they're just a little bit stuck and don't know how to take it to the next level. So is that something that you regularly come across?
Yeah, very much so. I think, especially given a lot of the challenges that are out there at the moment, I think, there's a lot of people wrote business plans last year, the year before, and not one of them catered for a global pandemic and everybody being locked in the house for 4.5 months. So there's a lot of challenge out there, and there's a lot of challenge that wasn't considered as part of a plan for a business, whether it be big or small. So a number of the clients that we're dealing with at the moment are wanting to think carefully about next steps and how they adapt their plans and how they maybe pivot in a lot of cases to focus on different things, or how they kind of really focus in on the things that matter and drive the plan that was over the line given the new challenges. So that is definitely a big topic of conversation at the moment.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, it's obviously it's affected everyone. Doesn't matter what size business you are, whether you're tiny or the biggest company. Yeah, everybody's been heavily impacted by COVID. But if we go back a little bit, like even before COVID, like a lot of SME owner managers pre scale up, people, business leaders who have ambition to grow, they have challenges. And what sort of challenges typically would they come across, would you say, the ones that you're dealing with?
I think the challenges can come in a million different forms, and I think when you boil it down, it comes down to one of two things for a business, whether it be small or a growing slightly larger business, and it comes down to having a defined and correct plan. We use the word strategy gets thrown around an awful lot, but I like to think of it. I'm a simple man, and I think in simple terms, and it's about having clarity over the destination and the plan for getting there. Either that needs refining, or they've got that and they're struggling to execute, to kind of make it happen, and that can be again down to a number of different things. It could be lack of experience, it could be lack of resource, lack of time or capacity, or a whole host of other things. So the biggest challenges, when you boil them right the way back, for me fundamentally come down to either strategic challenges or ones of execution. So they're the two categories that we tend to try and focus on.
Okay, cool. So you can help them with both of those. So you can help them define the strategy or refine that, and then you can help them look at what their current capabilities are and what resources they've got, and if they've got any gaps there, you can potentially help them fill them because of the work that Bright does. You do have like a talent element to it as well as the coaching and the consultancy. So
yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of the time it comes down to prioritization. So, again, I'm a big believer in not focusing on too many things, certainly from a strategic point of view. One or two specific items, if delivered very, very well, will most likely make 80% of the difference, and they'll make a success or not of the business. So really it's about trying to find out what those things are, prioritizing them within the business, and then changing the mindset. So for me, execution is both a process and a mindset. It has to be led from the top. It has to be something that the whole business understands, and everybody who's involved in it has to intimately understand the part that they play in that execution. So that can mean it requires additional hands or people to do that, or it could be a different way of thinking, or it could be a process change. So really what we have to do is to understand what the problem is, how it manifests itself within the business. And we've got formulas which we put down, or kind of ways of doing things which we talk to people about, which help them to get the traction that they need and identify the gaps. And that might be people, it might be skill set, it might be headcount or whatever it might be. We can help them with that if that's the right answer. If not, if it's more process driven, again, that's a slightly different response, but we can help them with that as well.
Okay, cool. Well, I know you've got loads of amazing experience, because we'll talk about that now. So we know each other because we both used to work for Sage, but
long time ago.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you were there close to 20 years, weren't you?
Yes.
Did you start off in telesales, but you've worked all the way up? You were managing director for the UK and Ireland for 6 months, like interim, and then you ended up as global vice president of the partner program. So you've had an amazing career in FTSE 100 software company. I would say probably the UK's biggest and best company that you work for. So you've got all that experience you've got, which you're now bringing to your clients through Bright. So what would you say? We were talking before about the difference between small business and corporate enterprise level. Is smaller ones are often very good at innovation and developing new products and services, but not so good at execution. But the larger ones are really, 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 really good at execution. They've hit on a formula of success, and they're very good at rinse and repeat, just doing it again and again, and like they've got that process locked down. So do you want to talk a little bit about that, or like kind of what you've learned from your time at Sage, and is that your experience that you've noticed?
Yeah, it very much is the experience that I've noticed. So I worked at all different levels within Sage, and in various different functions, and ran different parts of the business in different market segments and different regions and so on and so forth. So I was very lucky, and I worked with some fantastic people over the years, and Sage did me. I got a lot of opportunity out of Sage that maybe I wouldn't have got had I worked elsewhere. So I'll always be grateful to Sage as an organisation and to the people that I worked with. But to respond to your question, I think the biggest challenge for large businesses is they have an accountability to shareholders, to leaders, and there is an expectation from shareholders and investors of a certain level of growth or a certain trajectory for that business to kind of work towards. And if you veer off that, veering off it positively is not so much of a problem, although it makes you a little bit unpredictable, but coming off it negatively has huge impact. So it tends to steer a lot of the decisions that are made in larger organizations to adhere to the plan or to the forecast, to the projections, which can curtail or suffocate a little bit the creativity within bigger businesses. So that means that the execution arm can be very, very strong. They've got a lot of resources, they've got a lot of infrastructure, they've got money to throw behind things. Whereas for a smaller business, they've got all the creativity in the world, and the products can be very futuristic, or they can be thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead of bigger businesses, but they lack the capacity to execute. And when I say capacity, it could be physical capacity, or it could be a combination of different things, like the knowledge of how to take that product to market, or the importance of securing a strategic partner to take the product to market with, or whatever it might be. So there's a real challenge for smaller businesses and larger businesses in different contexts. So that would be an observation there. Another observation, I think, is, and I first noticed this when I was at Sage, and it's been true of my engagement after Sage as well, in that you've got, whenever I used to travel from country to country, and I had the same message to talk to each country about, the first thing that they would say to me when I sat down was, look, Jim, you need to understand it's different here. The culture is this, the products are that, the customers are this. And when you got to the bottom of it, they actually aren't that different. The truth of the matter is the problems or the challenges or the opportunities are exactly the same. They're just dressed in different clothes, so to speak. And when I've started consulting, what's been really fascinating for me is to learn that same philosophy is true of different industries. So no matter whether you go into a big business or a small business, whether you go into a retail business or a manufacturing business, the problems they face kind of center around a handful of things. It's either a product-related problem, or it's a customer-related problem, a people or a financial problem. So they kind of boil down to the same challenges. They just manifest themselves in slightly different ways, which makes my job a little bit easier, I guess, because once you've solved the problem for one business, you can understand it at least for another, and then you can work with them to help them to resolve it with their set of circumstances, which obviously are different every time.
Okay, that's interesting, yeah, because I mean, even going from different towns or cities sometimes, or different regions, you get to think of that, that it's maybe different in their local area than it is somewhere else. Not talking about countries countrywide, but yeah, local areas. Sometimes people have that opinion as well. So typically, what sort of services would you provide if someone wanted to work with Bright Group? Like if they're watching this and they think, yeah, this sounds like some guys that we need help from, like what would you do, or how would that work?
So it really depends on what the customer needs. In the main, it would involve things like a coaching engagement. I'll start with a coaching engagement. So a coaching engagement would be either with an individual leader of the business, whether it be a kind of head of, or the managing director, the owner, or whatever, and we would help them to figure out specifically where they wanted to go, why they wanted to be there, what the obstacles were, what tactics they were going to use to overcome them. And kind of coach them through that, and where appropriate, give them contacts, advice, information, processes, policies for them to take away and implement in the business themselves, and kind of make it all happen. From a consulting point of view, a lot of that is included, but we would be a little bit more hands-on. So we could sit down and have conversations about very specific implementations, get involved in those implementations to the point of delivery and project management. One of the things that I've prided myself on as a consultant is I engaged consultants, and I've worked with many different consultants over the years in different roles and different businesses. And a lot of the time, a consultant will come in, kind of hold a mirror up to the business, tell you what you already know, and then run for the hills and leave you to figure it all out yourself, which is not particularly helpful in my view. So I've prided myself on doing that, and because it is important, but also helping the business to figure out how to deal with that, and then more importantly, hanging around after to assist with the implementation and seeing it through to a successful outcome. And that, for some of the most recent clients, I've recently finished a 3-year engagement with a client where we sat down with them 3 years ago, and it was a pretty deep involvement. But we sat down with them 3 years ago, took them through a whole host of workshops to figure out what they wanted the business to look like, what the outcome was that they were after, which we established at the time they wanted to sell the business within 3 years. And we figured out what had to be done between that point and the 3-year point to get a successful sale of the business. And I kind of stuck around in a I guess, a non-exec type capacity to help them with the execution of that. And that business sold at the back end of last year. And it was very, it was a fair price was had for the business in terms of the asset that was created. The guys were happy, the buyer was happy, so everybody wins. But I think they're the types of services that we get involved in delivering to clients.
Okay.
And of course, you've got the recruitment arm as well, which I should mention. For a lot of businesses at the moment, I see a lot of people advertising jobs themselves on LinkedIn, which is good. It's a great way to reach a lot of people. What we're finding at the moment is a lot of our recruitment clients are struggling to manage the volume and the quality that's coming through from that particular method of advertising. So they're getting a lot of volume and very little by the way of quality. So you're getting people who are entirely unqualified applying for roles, and you're having to sift through that and respond to them empathetically and kind of manage that process. So we've got a couple of offerings through the recruitment arm of the business. One is your standard recruitment service, which you'd expect. The other is helping businesses from a consultation point of view, helping businesses to effectively insource the recruitment effort. So introducing them to the processes and the policies and procedures and techniques and kind of ways of finding the right clients at the right time and so on, but embedding that within their business so they can, kind of teach a man to fish thing. They can then set that up within their organization and successfully find the best talent that's available for them.
Okay, yeah. Well, the way you do it sounds a lot more valuable, like you say, than just telling someone what to do and then disappearing again. Because if you've got to that point where you're in agreement of the way forward and how to develop the business, you want to see that through, don't you? Like, you want to make sure that's going to happen for their sake, but you want to see a positive outcome. But I'm just thinking out loud here that you might get the buy-in from the client that you're dealing with, but then getting the buy-in from all the other people within the organization, that's quite challenging sometimes, isn't it? So something I think Sage was always really, really good at was communicating the message from the top down to the bottom so that everybody knew exactly where the business was heading, and really good at like the all hands meetings and regular briefings, and it was like the same message, just like repeated again and again. So is that how important is that, would you say?
I think in larger organizations, in all organizations, it's critical. In larger organizations, it's more of a challenge because of, the volume of people, the geographical spread, the layers of management. In smaller organizations, it's actually, it's critically important, but it's a lot easier to achieve. So if you're leading a team of people and you can get them on a mission, you can talk to them about, one or two specific priorities that need to be delivered for the organization, and get them on board with that and communicate clearly to them the part that they play individually, you can really get some good traction. And one of the critical, from an execution point of view, one of the critical elements that I bleat on and on and on about is and I actually wrote a blog about this a couple of weeks back, is, there's an old saying, weighing the pig doesn't make it any fatter. And I'm a big believer in that. So just measuring the outputs of something or of an effort doesn't make it any better or worse. It just tells you the output. So I'm a big believer in defining what inputs are required to get you to the outputs that you're looking for. And they're the things really that should be measured on a regular basis. So when you're communicating the mission and you're doing that with passion and conviction and you're getting everybody on board, they understand the part they play, they need to intimately understand, this is the part you play, Paul, and these are the things that you must do in these quantities and this regularity in order for that to be effective. And that's what we're going to measure you on, and that's what we're going to talk about, every day, every week or whatever. And if those things are done consistently, and if the measures are measured consistently, and people feel like they're part of if you can gamify that in some way, or if you can make it exciting to get to that point, people really engage with that. And that for me is a big part of execution. When I call it a mindset as well as a process, that's what I mean.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I've not heard that expression before, but I like it. I'm going to start using it. But yeah, I think because people don't always understand what part they've got to play. They might just get told you've got to do this, and they don't really understand why they're doing it or like why that's important. But it's almost like reverse engineered that this is where we're going, and if everybody does their bit, then we're all going to get there. That's why it's important. So, okay, I love it. Okay, so we'll go back to the COVID situation. So obviously, like that's been devastating for a lot of people personally and professionally. What have you noticed in the last 7 months or so?
I think the biggest thing I've noticed is it's not so much people's reluctance to plan ahead. It's more their desire to focus on right now, or their need to focus on right now. So for a lot of businesses, as awful as it is, it's a matter of survival and it's a matter of making sure that you've got the cash to pay the bills. And anybody who runs a business understands the importance of things like cash flow and the impact that can have on the organization. So for a lot of businesses, they're focused on the here and now, and they're focused on survival, and they're focused on making sure that they've got enough in the bank and kind of to serve their customers, to pay their staff, and so on and so forth. What I've also noticed on the flip side of that, to be slightly more positive and optimistic, I've noticed a lot of people taking the bull by the horns and looking at this and seeing opportunity when everybody else is seeing or suffering or seeing the downside. So there's a lot of businesses are looking to expand. Things like software businesses have boomed. I think everybody wishes they had shares in Zoom. Certainly, I wish I'd bought shares in Zoom in January because it'd be worth an awful lot of money right now. So things like that. There are still a lot of opportunities out there. I spoke to one entrepreneur this morning who has an invention, a product which has been patented, and he's ready to go, and he's absolutely chomping at the bit to get running with it, to the point where I'm kind of trying to make sure that he's got everything in line before he pulls the trigger and gets on with it. But there are plenty of people out there who are seeing the opportunities that exist because they are there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to hear. Definitely. I mean, I know I've been thinking about this quite a bit lately. Like, although it's been a tough year, actually, it's been a great year in some respects for me, in terms of like, if you're entrepreneurial or you think you're innovative or creative. I've never been more like, I've always been creative and innovative, but like this year has really put me to the test. And I would think if you're an entrepreneur, like, this is a great time to like see if you really are as good as you think you are, and like. Because I've just been innovating and coming up with new ideas and new products and services all the time, and it's not this in certain ways. Business isn't as good as it was last year, but in other ways it's better. Like, I'm doing things now that have always been in the back of my mind and I've never got around to doing them, but now it's forcing me to do it, and I'm really excited about what's going on now and the next 6 months. So yeah. So
I agree. I think for a lot of people, they've through choice or otherwise, they've been put in the position where they've had to innovate and reinvent and pivot, change, do things differently. And that's, for those that are able to do that and do it well, it's fantastic. What I've noticed is that a lot of people and a lot of leaders. This is probably true. I think a little bit more of the growing business rather than the startup business. But a lot of leaders have never had to manage an established operation through a period of significant change. So there's a lot of leaders now, like semi-senior or senior leaders who are Generation Y. They've never had to manage through bad times. It's always been, in relative terms at least, it's always been a positive macroeconomic environment. It's been the business, the country, the world has been largely in growth, and the customer opportunity has been growing. So this is for a lot of leaders, this is the first time they've ever had to reassess and think and really dig down and find ways to solve problems that they've never come across. And in a lot of the coaching that we're doing, one of the big changes we've noticed is that the engagements previously came at a company level. So it might be a company that would want to talk to us about coaching their entire leadership team. Mm-hmm. The company would pay for that and engage us. What we've noticed now is that I've got individuals coming to us. So outside of the company engagement, I've got individuals coming to us and saying, look, I could do with some coaching, or I'm looking for a coach to help me to understand what my options are, how I accelerate this, or how I deal with this period of challenge, or whatever. So it's gone from pretty much exclusively being engagement with companies to being a balance between engagement with the companies and engagement with the individuals.
Okay, now that's interesting, because it's not just challenge for the business. Like their whole way of doing business might be changing, but like the way a leader might operate, and like if you're managing teams remotely, I mean, I know people have been taught about remote working for years, but it's been forced upon everyone, and some people have never had to do that before, and all of a sudden they've got a team that they can't see in person. Yes, they can do Zoom chats or Teams chats or whatever, but that feeling of not being as in control as maybe they were before, and a challenge for some people.
That's a great example, actually, and that's exactly the sort of thing that's coming up. You know, I was lucky enough / unfortunate enough to take my first ever general management role in July of 2008, which was the month before the huge banking crash. So the business that I was put in charge of, my first ever business, just literally overnight went into free fall. So to manage through that was a baptism of fire for me. I look at the time; it was horrendous. You know, it was. You know, I don't think I slept for pretty much for weeks trying to get a hold of it. But I look back on that now as one of the most positive experiences I've ever had, because it taught me so much in such a short period of time. Not just about how to manage it, but about how to sort of be mentally resilient to that, and to be able to take a step back, calm myself down, make rational decisions about, you know, some very, very difficult decisions about people, you know, redundancies and jettisoning products that customers loved because they just, you know, they weren't viable anymore. And so it was a baptism of fire, but incredibly important for me, and that they're the types of situations I think that these leaders who've managed through positive times are now finding themselves in, whether it be, you know, managing teams remotely, or businesses going into free fall, or, you know, customers being more challenging, or whatever it might be. And that, for me, there's nothing more powerful than being able to engage somebody from outside of your business who has no vested interest in whether you are successful or not. It's kind of unconditional engagement with somebody where you can have an honest conversation, tell them how you're feeling, how it's affecting you, you know, talk through the options, agree which one is best and how you're going to do it, and have them hold you to account to do that. So that I'm really enjoying those conversations at the moment. They're some of the parts of the business that I think are most enjoyable for me.
Okay, yeah, I can see. I mean, that would be really valuable as well, like, because if you're a business leader as well, like often, well, usually people are looking to you for the answer, and you maybe can't talk to your colleagues or your peers about challenges that you're facing, but being able to speak to you, who's outside the business, and like you say, you're impartial. You haven't got a vested interest in whether in the actual outcome, other than you want them to be successful. But that is really good that you can do that. Yeah. So it's kind of like that non-executive director type role you mentioned before, as well as being a coach and a consultant advisor. And also, I think the fact that you've worked at the highest level, like there isn't a bigger company than Sage, really. So the fact that you've worked in all those roles, people are always going to see you as like being having more experience than pretty much every other business that's out there, I would say. So yeah, they're going to look up to you, and you've got lots of credibility and experience that anybody can learn from. So yeah.
Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment.
It's all right. Okay, so what do you think for the final few months of this year and the next sort of start of the new year? What, for anyone that's watching this and they might be thinking, bloody hell, like I don't know what I'm doing here, or like kind of what's coming up. What have you got any advice or any kind of?
Yeah, well, advice. I'm cautious about dispensing advice, but I can give you an opinion. So I think for me, who knows what's going to happen with the COVID situation. Every day the government is kind of introducing new legislation or changing aspects of what they've already put down, and they affect certain industries more than others. I would, I've got a few different businesses, and a couple of them are kind of smack bang in the middle of the most harsh legislation that's been put down, and they have the potential to be quite heavily affected by any subsequent changes. So my philosophy is do as much as you can right now with these businesses to shore them up, to make sure that they are as robust as they possibly can be. Look to introduce wherever possible or maximize wherever possible any recurring revenue lines that you can secure, making sure that the cash continues to flow into the business, and really put down some plans for best, middle and worst case scenario, and understand what levers you have to pull as and when things begin to shift. So if you have a plan for complete lockdown, a plan for restricted access to your business, and a plan for everything being released and going gangbusters, then you're in a good place, because you can look at those plans as required, and you can pick up different parts of them, different aspects of them, and run with them. You can adjust and so on and so forth. But I think having somebody to use as a soundboard, somebody to bounce ideas off, somebody to challenge you, somebody to push you, because I think for a lot of people, this is a difficult period mentally to kind of remain focused, to remain positive, and that requires focus, and it requires somebody or something to hold you to account. It'd be the easiest thing in the world for people to say, oh, this is just impossible, and kind of sit back, rock back in their chair and throw their hands in the air. But this is not the time to do that. This is the time to dig in, make sure that you have plans in place, make sure you hold yourself to account, and somebody is there to hold you to account, and keep going forward. I think that's the message I'd probably put across.
Great, love it. Okay, and
not to sound too rocky about it, but you've got to keep getting back up and keep going. There's no good kind of taking this on the chin and throwing the towel in. You've got to keep going. Yeah, no, I love it. That's a good positive message to put out there. We touched on it a little bit before, like the kind of types of business owner maybe, but is there a particular type of business that you're keen to work with, or we have said kind of like established SME. I know you do some mentoring for the NatWest Entrepreneur Accelerator program, and you do like supporting startups, but it's primarily kind of established SMEs and pre-scale up. That's kind of what you're looking at. Is that right? Or, yeah, I would say
any particular industry.
It's probably an 80-20 split. I think you're right. The pre-scale up or those businesses who are ready to start thinking about how they scale and how they exit. They're the types of businesses that I tend to engage with the most. Industry-wise, obviously I've got 20-year history with tech, so any tech businesses, I understand the challenges that they face, the customer demographic, all of those, the technology, all of those sorts of things are very familiar to me. So tech is an obvious industry. But over recent couple of years, I've helped everything from housing and builders to investment companies, to utility companies, to technology. So it really is quite varied, and it's more about the challenges that they face than the industry that they're in. But I've got background in tech. We've got clients on board, as I say, investment, housing, utility management, and various others as well. Okay. Well, I was looking on your website before. You've got an some impressive logos on there, some impressive clients that you work with. So I would encourage people to check out your website. So your website, is it
wearebright.net, is that?
Yeah, wearebright.net. Yeah. So there's all kinds of, most of the products that we offer are kind of highlighted on there. There's not a detailed breakdown. If anybody wants to talk in detail about either the recruitment or the coaching or the management consulting products, obviously they can get in touch with me, and I'd be more than happy to jump on a call and have a chat with them about what we can offer. But there's case studies on the website. We've spent a bit of time trying to talk to our clients and get valuable feedback from them that we can then share with other people, so they understand the value that we've added, and it's not just me spouting off or the website talking about our services. These are recommendations from live customers, actual customers who we've worked with.
Yeah, great. And I know you're sharing some excellent content as well on LinkedIn and Twitter, so I encourage people to follow you, and connect with you on LinkedIn and on Twitter as well. So I've written it down, Jim Scott _UK.
That's the Twitter one, yeah.
And obviously they can find you on LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn as well, yeah.
Bright Group. Okay, yeah. Awesome. Well, that really enjoyed talking to you there. I'll let you go now because I know you're busy and you've probably got some more calls to have this afternoon. So thanks again for doing that, and good luck and appreciate you taking time out for this. All right.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thanks, Jim. Okay.
Take care. Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.